So OpenStack is a framework for open infrastructure. So it's something you can deploy to provide cloud resources to users, whether in order to sell resources to anyone with a credit card on the internet, or more for internal needs of a given organization. In the first case, we call it the public cloud, and in the second case, more like a private cloud. OpenStack is more a framework of various components that you can use to build such infrastructure and integrate other technologies in the process. It's an open source project. It's collaboratively built by hundreds of companies and organizations around the world. My role in the project is as a member staff of the OpenStack Foundation. I'm the vice president of engineering, and that's in charge of all the coordination of the upstream open source project. So making sure that everything works correctly, everyone collaborates on an equal footing, making sure that we produce a release every 6 months, and ensuring the long-term health of the open source project. So solving community issues and try to predict future issues and proactively solve them.
Okay. So I kind of hear what you said, and it's a similar note on the homepage of the website. But what exactly does OpenStack consist of? So what are the underlying tools, and what can you do with them? Like I see terms like managing compute storage and networking resources. So is it as a suite of command line tools, a suite of graphical tools, a suite of both? And does that consist of smaller sub-projects? How do all these bits of tooling fit together, and how would someone use them in an application?
Sure. So the main components are providing an API, an HTTP REST API that you can use to request resources and manage them. So, for example, you have a component called Nova that you can use to start a VM on compute resources using a single API call. Same thing to provision block storage to attach it to that VM, or to store data in an object storage solution. So it's, once you have an OpenStack deployment, it's pretty much looking like you have your own Amazon Web Services set of resources. So you have a service that will give you VM as a service. So an API call and you get a VM with IP address and you can connect to it. Or you have a service that will let you store data in the cloud, very much like S3 in Amazon Web Services, and that's called Swift. We have a component that provides block storage that you can attach to those VMs. We have a component that stores disk images that you can run on those VMs. We have a component that presents bare metal resources in the same way as virtual machines, so you can actually instantiate workloads directly on bare metal machines without the overhead of virtualization. So I would say it depends on exactly what you combine, what components you combine. But the key resources are the infrastructure as a service services, which basically give you an API to drive resources. So networking, you can request a network, connect various VMs to it. Storage, you can store data in object storage. You can create block storage volumes and attach them to VMs. You can request virtual machines themselves. You can also request bare metal machines, the same thing. So that's the main components, but we have a whole ecosystem of other components that build on top of those. For example, we have Magnum that lets you provision a Kubernetes cluster on top of virtual machines or bare metal machines that are provisioned by Nova, the compute component. There is the core of the engine, I would say, which provides compute, networking, and storage-based resources. But you also have an ecosystem of components that build on top of that for more specific use cases.
And so I'm guessing it's an abstraction as well. So it doesn't really matter what exactly you're running on, however many combination of real machines or virtual machines, you just say, I need X gigabytes of RAM, X cores, and OpenStack handles it.
Yes, you basically provide a set of resources constraints, and the scheduling system will provision virtual machines or bare metal machines to answer that request.
And you mentioned Kubernetes in there, and there's sort of other frameworks in this world, such as Mesos as well. Where does OpenStack fit into this whole kind of orchestration of resources world?
So the Mesos or Kubernetes or Docker Swarm all let you orchestrate complex applications. Basically, you can describe your application in a way that will scale to a number of hosts, and that lets you describe your application in more of a microservice type infrastructure. The way we integrate with those technologies is twofold. We can provision Mesos clusters or Kubernetes clusters or Docker Swarm clusters through the Magnum component that I mentioned earlier. It's basically you have this API, the Magnum API, that lets you provision with one single call. You can get a cluster of machines that will have Kubernetes or Mesos or Docker Swarm deployed on them, and then use Kubernetes or Mesos or Docker Swarm credentials and APIs to interact with it. So it's really infrastructure provisioning in that case for your users. But we also leverage Kubernetes itself for the deployment of OpenStack itself. Like you can deploy OpenStack using containers. Like each component would run in a different container, and to orchestrate that complex application that is OpenStack, we can also use internally Kubernetes as a layer for orchestrating OpenStack itself. So if you look at how we integrate with those technologies, we leverage them under the hood to in order to orchestrate the OpenStack deployment itself, but we also provision clusters of Kubernetes or Mesos or Docker Swarm for users of the OpenStack system, so that they can benefit from those high-level abstractions to orchestrate their own applications.
So I guess in summary of that, you're not trying to compete in the container orchestration space, but instead you let people leverage whatever tool they want to in that space instead. Exactly.
It's really to us. It's really two different sets of problems. And Kubernetes is really, or Mesos or Docker Swarm, are really targeted to application operators, people that have an application and want to run it. Whereas OpenStack is more targeted to infrastructure providers. Like you have this set of resources, you want to give people access to them in various ways, which includes Kubernetes clusters, but also VMs, bare metal machines, other high-level constructs like blocks, object storage servers. How do you do that? And OpenStack is the answer for that piece of the puzzle. It doesn't try to compete with container orchestration systems, which are highly complementary.
So I'm guessing, if you can mention it, that people are probably, if they're using kind of any major hosting company or major cloud hosting company, they've probably been using OpenStack without realizing it, or they've been using infrastructure run by OpenStack without realizing it.
Yes, I mean, we either indirectly by using applications that actually run on OpenStack, like PayPal or eBay or WeChat in China, or I mean, we're seeing OpenStack run under the hood of visible applications everywhere, but also more directly by being a customer of one of the OpenStack public clouds, which we have in various areas. So we have 25 public cloud providers today, over 60 data centers that are all running OpenStack, all being interoperable. So it's smaller cloud providers than the Googles and Amazons and Microsofts, but combined together, they actually provide a pretty compelling group in the other category.
And unless I'm misunderstanding something in your website footer, is this mostly through Rackspace?
No. Well, it used to be. I mean, when OpenStack was started in 2010, it was started by Rackspace and NASA for their own needs. Since then, we have a lot of different public cloud providers. We still have Rackspace, obviously, but we have a lot of cloud providers, especially in Europe, because that allows them to provide a differentiator to clouds that are more directly under U.S. legislation. So it's pretty. We have OVH in Europe. We have City Cloud. We have City Network. That they all have this compelling advantage over US-based cloud, that they're tied to European law rather than US law. They also have different compliance requirements, like the City Network clouds that are based in Sweden actually are compliant with the legislations around banking and insurance, the European legislation we have. So that lets them attract users that can't really fit in the global Amazon or Google picture. And we really believe that there will be a lot of different cloud providers around the world with specialty and specific use cases that they are more targeted toward. So we're very happy with the current state, the current momentum behind public cloud, especially in Europe.
And you mentioned that as part of your job, you're in charge of making sure that the sort of 6-monthly release cycle happens. And so within the last month, you've had a new release, OpenStack Pike, the 16th release. So that would be 8 years, I guess, roughly. What's new in OpenStack Pike?
Yes, it's the 16th release. We've done a 3-month release very early on, so it doesn't. I mean, like OpenStack just turned 7. The project, so we had 2 3-month release, I think, in the list, but we're back to 6 months release cycles now, which is a good compromise between too often and not enough. In Pike, we've been working on several things. There is a lot of buying back technical debt, like making sure that we'll run with the latest Python version. That's something that was on our plate for a long time, and we need to prepare for 2020 when Python version 2 will be out of maintenance. So that's great progress there. We've also been working on better integration with Kubernetes. As Kubernetes emerges as the de facto leader on this container orchestration space, we've been more aggressively targeting it for deployment of OpenStack itself, but also making sure that the components in an OpenStack-driven open infrastructure, individual components can be reused by Kubernetes itself. If you are a Kubernetes shop and all you ever want is a Kubernetes cluster, then you should still be able to take advantage of OpenStack to get block storage to Kubernetes pods and or attach Neutron networks to Kubernetes pods. We're seeing the largest deployment of Kubernetes in the world relying on OpenStack more and more, and so we need to make sure that OpenStack works really well, even if you are not directly using it for virtual machines. That means making sure that Cinder, the block storage component, and Neutron, the networking component, or Ironic, the bare metal component, can be used in a more standalone manner in a very Kubernetes-centric deployment. So that's been worked on in Pike. Otherwise, it's plenty of. We have 60 project teams in OpenStack, so it's always difficult to have a complete view. But every team has been making continuous progress. We have the sales architecture used in Nova has been improved so that you can actually scale. Nova Sales is a way to scale your Nova deployment for hundreds of thousands of nodes instead of thousands of nodes, and that's also an interesting progress there. It's a long term. One of the issues we have from an engineering perspective is that now we have users, so we can't really break them, and so every change we make, we have to make sure that it won't break users, and obviously that means going more slowly than projects that can just experiment and break things. But that's also when you have the best feedback, when you have lots of users and they bring back their requirements. It's where the synergy between users and developers is the most efficient.
And just a few questions around kind of the organization. So you refer to the OpenStack Foundation a lot. So I'm guessing firstly that the OpenStack Foundation is an independent foundation. You're not part of Apache or Linux project or anything like that. It's your own separate foundation.
Yes, the OpenStack Foundation is an independent non-profit entity. It is tasked with organizing events around OpenStack and providing this neutral ground for trademark assets, governance, etc. I mean, it's really difficult to grow when you are a significant open source project to grow beyond your a single sponsor, because it's difficult for other companies or organizations to contribute if one of them has all the keys to the kingdom. So you have to provide this neutral asset lock to hold the trademark and to organize neutral events, making sure that development can happen in a very on a level playing ground where everyone can contribute without being privileged if you are from one company versus another. And that's really the role of the foundation, to set up that playing field, making sure that the rules are respected, that everyone can play. And it's been an interesting ride so far.
And I mean, looking at the members of the foundation, I don't think I have ever seen an open source project with quite so many members, so, which I guess is a good thing. So I'm assuming, does every company above a certain membership level with an interest in the platform contribute in some way with a membership fee to keep the foundation going? And I guess probably fund a sort of core set of independent engineers as well.
So in contributing to the project itself, you don't have to pay the foundation or be a member of the foundation. But yes, there is a number of organizations that have a keen interest in seeing OpenStack be successful, and more it's direct users of the technology. So we have more and more direct support from companies that rely on OpenStack for their own needs, rather than be a service provider that will serve others. And all of those have a keen interest in making sure that OpenStack is successful. And it's everything the foundation does is basically what everyone else either cannot do because they are not seen as neutral, or things that everyone benefit from, like the organizing events where everyone can participate and have a marketplace of presentations. Those kind of actions are things that the foundation does. We also run a certification program that is also neutral and shared between various training organizations. We also have trademark certification programs to call yourself an OpenStack cloud. What does it exactly mean? What rules do you have to follow? So all of those little things that make the ecosystem sustainable are things that the OpenStack Foundation does. But it's a really small group of people, so we don't have neutral engineering teams that you can throw at problems whenever. If you really end up in a situation where the OpenStack Foundation has to cover a significant part of the development, that would mean that the community is dysfunctional, because that means it's not sustainable by itself. So it's a thin balancing exercise. You have to have enough people to keep things going and watch things, but not enough that people start to rely on the neutral resources to get things like development done.
And I mean, I can imagine looking at this list of companies from all over the world with a wide variety of different agendas and requirements. I can imagine that balancing all those must be somewhat of a challenge. I don't know whose job it is to do all that, but yeah, I mean, European companies, American companies, Chinese companies, all with probably very, very, very different things that they want to accomplish. It must be quite a dizzying feat to balance all of that, I'd imagine. But
it's been my job for the last 7 years. I would say it's when you grow with the project. It used to be hundreds of people, now it's thousands of people. Now the new challenge is, like you mentioned, making sure that we integrate contributors from China. Because it's a very different culture. They have technical barriers. They have, there is no real open source community that managed to be fully worldwide and able to integrate Chinese contributors. But we have so many Chinese users, so many extremely large deployments in China. We really need to integrate them in the community as much as we can. So it's our current challenge, I would say. Our next challenge is to make sure that we embrace contributors from China.
And I mean, I'm just looking at the contribution stats for Pike, and it's actually quite interesting because you have a large percentage from Red Hat in terms of companies, but then the largest percentage is actually other. So I guess that means a lot of small individuals or small 1 to kind of 10 person development shops and things like that. So it's nice to see that the community seems to run pretty well amongst the split. And there's a couple of people who certainly are bigger contributors than others, and I haven't dug in to see quite who they are, but I can do that later. So yeah, good job, I think, is the basic answer there. Just to wrap up, the last question I usually have is about future plans. So as far as I can tell, no, it looked like your release naming was alphabetical, but I don't think it is actually. So
it is.
It is, because I could see Collar was the... Oh, no, that's a different project. Okay.
Yeah, that's the project that does the packaging of OpenStack in containers. Next release is Quince.
Quince, very nice. It's not the most pleasant fruit, but let's hope.
It's Queens as in king and queens.
Oh, right. Okay, Queens. Okay, not Quince. Okay, cool. So, I mean, I know 6 months is a reasonably long time in development life cycles, but what have you got planned for that release? What's your major priorities for the next release?
So it's a very, very hard question to answer at this point because we just got started. We'll actually meet the various development teams. We'll get together in Denver next week to basically bootstrap the cycle. And by the end of that week, by just visiting various rooms, I'll probably have a more accurate pictures in terms of being very very specific in features. We already have 2 release goals for this release. One is more of a technical depth thing, like how we organize how we run integration tests within the various projects. The other is to make sure that we can specify policy rules in various projects in the code rather than in configuration. That means like saying that you have to be in a given group to be allowed to do certain actions. This is currently configured at each project level, and we want to move that to more of a code thing. So those are, I would say, both things that are more technical depth reduction than shiny new features. We expect to make progress on improving the Nova scheduler. The Nova scheduler has been a pain point in scaling to very large deployments, especially public cloud needs. So we want to try to break it out of Nova and make it its own service so that it can be used for scheduling other types of resources than just VMs. And obviously that's a long-term thing, but it's been going on for a few development cycles already, and we hope to make great progress on that during the coming cycle. Otherwise, it's really difficult to predict.
No. I think that sounds like enough of a preview anyway. And for anyone else interested in learning some more, I could see you have your sort of major user group conference coming up in Sydney at the beginning of November, which is actually a real shame because I am half Australian and I'm actually going to be back in Melbourne about 4 days after that event.
That's sad.
So just miss it. But
we'll be in Berlin in like a year from now. So
yeah, I think I saw that. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll be in Berlin in a year, but anyway, we'll see. But it's a shame. Yeah, I don't know if you have any events related coming up in Melbourne around the same time. But if anyone is in or near Sydney or at the beginning of November, the 6th, 8th of November, then there's the Open Infrastructure event where I guess there'll be lots of speakers from a wide variety of companies kind of talking about use cases, but also features and best use cases and things like that.
Yes, the OpenStack Summit is our biannual major event where we get the most interesting talks and keynotes and showcase of OpenStack technology. And We used to do that just after release, and nobody had time to actually leverage the release. So now it's like 2 or 3 months out after the release. So it lets organization build products and offerings, and users start deploying the new thing. And so we have a much more interesting content. We also have a track called the Forum, which is cross-community discussions around the future of OpenStack, like discussing between users and developers on the gaps from the previous release, which we should be doing for the upcoming release cycles. So it's a very interesting, future-looking community exercise where we deliver on our promise of doing open design, which is developing OpenStack in the open, not behind closed doors in small groups, but making sure everyone can tap into the future of the software.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time. I mean, OpenStack has been one of those technologies I've heard about, but because I've never personally had a need for it, I've never really dug into it in any great detail. So it was really interesting to speak to you and find out a bit more. Thanks for your time.